So, hello everybody, welcome to Radio Sofia. Radio Sofia is a virtual platform to host academic and non academic discussions on socio-economic and political issues. Oftentimes, many interesting ideas and concepts that originate in a university classroom or within the walls of higher education institutions are not accessible to common public who never get a chance to enter these esteemed institutions. So, Radio Sofia tries to rupture some of these boundaries and take fascinating debates and talks by PhD students and faculty outside the classroom setup. And today, one such amazing discussion is on a very popular topic, gender and queerness in Hindi cinema. I'm sure almost each one of us watches movies for entertainment. With the internet, we even access world cinema and Indian cinema in multiple languages. However, I'm not very sure how many of us make a concrete effort to constructively analyze the movies we consume. So, to help us think about Hindi cinema and how gender and queerness appears on screen and how it shapes our perspectives off screen, we have with us Mr. Gourab Ghosh. Gaurav is pursuing his PhD in performance studies at the School of Arts and Aesthetics in JNU, New Delhi. He teaches literature and gender sexuality as a visiting faculty at NMIMS Mumbai and Tetso College in Dimapur, Nagaland. He is a queer rights activist and also a theatre artist. He divides his time between Delhi, Kolkata, Banaras for his academic and research work related to performance histories and queer communities in India. So, a very warm welcome to you, Gaurav. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Kranti, for the introduction, and hello to everyone who have joined us today, Sofia, Team Sofia, Radio Sofia, and so I am not really a film study scholar as such. So, but I obviously analyze films for my own research. I look at performances. So today what I'm going to do is that I will talk about certain films and look at those films through the lens of gender and queer theories or studies, and so it will be not only me talking, but I would also like you to comment, like you can write in the chat box, ask questions, also comment, and that it will be helpful for me or also for Kranti to then open up the discussion in a more elaborate manner. So, we are calling it Hindi cinema, and as you know that there is a difference between when we call it Hindi cinema from Bombay or Hindi cinema and Bollywood, because Bollywood is a term which was coined quite late, and it has its very definite ways of understanding and functioning also, whereas cinema in Bombay particularly developed with the Hindustani language or Hindi language. And so we can as you know, that Indian cinema and particularly Bombay cinema is more than 100 years old, and we have celebrated 100 years of Indian cinema a few years back, but then but if we need to talk about the treatment of gender or queerness in Indian cinema or Hindi cinema, it is a long it's a fantastic area of research, but it's also not possible to talk about all the aspects in half an hour or 40 minutes. So, but what I have done is that I will focus on the gender aspect, as well as I will focus on the queer aspect. And in the gender aspect, I have divided, I will take up women issues in relation to certain films, and I will talk about women empowerment, nation building, partition, sexual violence, marriage, as we have seen these themes getting treated or getting represented in the selective films. And then I will also look at the understanding or the representation of LGBT or queer community, queer identities in Hindi cinema. So so more or less I will follow this framework, and please I will talk about handful number of films. So I would be extremely happy if you also bring your comments or interpretation of other films, and not only on of Hindi films but also films in other Indian languages, because there are some very good films in Bangla, in Marathi, I know, but if you can give more cross references, that would be great. So the first film that I would like to talk about is because we are going through a very interesting political phase in Indian politics, and as we know, post-partition, with the Nehruvian vision and nation building project, we see that woman-centric films were getting produced, and one of the most significant film during that time is Mother India in 1957. And we see the treatment of gender, or the question of building nation on various issues, in Mother India. And particularly we see a wife, we see a mother, we see a kind of a leader figure in Nargis. And so Mother India is definitely like a canon in film studies, but it also makes us question, or makes us think that what kind of ideas or treatments were used to produce films like Mother India, and how you actually, through these films, how you can politicize your film audience on the question of gender. Mother India definitely is talking about women empowerment, talking about a very empowered woman facing all the hurdles of society and time and winning. And then definitely with the sacrifice, the moment of sacrifice is almost becoming a figure of of Mother India, of India, which who is extremely empowered, who is full of values and tradition. So this is quite interesting to see these figure of Nargis, the character that Nargis played, and which is getting equated with this very young nation, India. So this is one which really, I want all of you to think, and I'm assuming, I'm believing that some of you have already watched Mother India, so you can talk about certain song sequence, certain scenes and certain episodes, which are very carefully crafted, very carefully shot, to obviously highlight certain aspects of gender empowerment. So this is one. And then the next one that I would like to talk about, partition, because we went through a very quote unquote unnatural partition, unnatural division of Indian subcontinent. And so the two films that I have chosen, there are lots of films based on partition, based on communal violence, based on the gender and sexual violence, the backdrop of partition. But these two films I have chosen because I think that it will help us to have a more solid discussion, because these are very recent films, and most of us either have read the novel on which these films are based, or we have watched the film. So the one is Earth, 1947 Earth, and one is Pinjar, and obviously, as you know, that both the films are based on two very important writers' works, Ice Candy Man and Pinjar, the novel itself. So, what is also, we have to understand that how Indian cinema, and particularly Hindi cinema, was looking at the Western frontier, partition in the Western frontier, and bringing out the violence that women faced during the partition. And art definitely brings not only the sexual violence but also a communal angle to it. And it does it very beautifully through the through ideas of love, ideas of friendship, idea of betrayal, idea of loss. And so this is one film that I think will be interesting for us to see in the trilogy of fire, earth and water, how and I was treating gender, as such, to highlight certain issues. Obviously these are element based, the punch bhoot, as we say, that obviously based films, but then obviously they look at gender in a more a concrete way at the backdrop of partition and colonial times. The next one is Pinjar, and we all, I'm sure that some of you have read Pinjar or watched the film, and we also again see the treatment of gender in Pinjar, and obviously this is a very well made film. And but the question again comes to our mind is that how these women, and we have to look at these films not only as visual texts, but we have to also think that how these filmmakers are treating this media as to talk about gender issues, one. And second is that when we look at the archive of partition, or the partition archives, through anecdotes, through poems, through paintings, through sketches, through letters, how can we have a kind of a dialogue across disciplines, across genres, and if we can think of these films as entry points for this kind of a cross-disciplinary understanding or studies of gender. And I'm little bit not really going in the linear form, like in the publication of the films, but there is this recent film. I will come to fire when I will talk about the queer part, but this one film I really find that we all should watch, and we should all try to think of women issues, non-binary gender identities, and sexual desires, and women's sexuality, in this film, Lipstick Under My Burqa, which was released in 2016. And the treatment, of all these issues that I have mentioned in Lipstick Under My Burqa, which is age and desire, which is sexual liberation and choice, and which is also the idea of your dream and your and religion, or a very conservative society. So all these things obviously revolving around the idea of gender is something which makes this film extremely interesting, extremely important as a important film to study. So I would like you to tell me that how you think, or what you think about this film, Lipstick Under My Burqa, and particularly these issues. Particularly, we don't talk about age. We don't talk about old women and sexual desire, or old women and their desire for love, desire for companionship, or old women and loneliness. So Lipstick Under My Burqa definitely through the character of Buaji, tells gives us this fantastic space to understand that how an old woman also what an old woman goes through when she's lonely, when she has sexual fantasy, when she has desire, and this is emotional, this is sexual desire. So this is one film that we can talk in our discussion session. Then the next this couple of films that I think which will be extremely interesting for our this today's discussion is gender and politics in biographical, semi-biographical, or political films. And I have taken three films, and I'm not going into the summary of the films because that will be extremely boring, but I'm just mentioning these films because it will help us to understand not only the development of or the treatment of gender through certain categories or through certain ways in this in the cinema. So these films are one is Andhi, released in 1975. The next one is Gulal in 2009, and then the third one is Rajniti in 2010. So we can talk about that all these three films have some references to certain political figures, men and women both. And but we also see how all these three films talk about political ambition, not only in the context of women characters, but also in the context of men. And particularly in a film like Gulal, we see that how this political ambition slash political violence almost moves so freely and so independently across these two gender binaries. Gular also shows us a very shows us a character which is gender non-binary, you know, and a performer, you know. And so we can talk about this idea of performance, or I'm not really want to talk about Foucault, but Foucault's idea of heterotopia. So there are different spaces, these spaces which are for the other, the spaces which we generally don't consider quote unquote mainstream spaces, or normal spaces, or normative spaces. So how these films are creating certain spaces, when they are getting shot, when they are making the film, how these filmmakers are also perhaps very consciously or unconsciously, or perhaps this is the technique, to create certain spaces, through which they are actually making this deviant other, or the desire or the fantasy or the political ambition of particular gender, either it will be binary, in the binary or in the non-binary category, coming and playing out. So Gulal becomes a very important film when we look at violence, gender, and these kind of spaces. Rajniti again is a very talks about contemporary politics in India, talks about how men and women participate in this great Indian political scene, and how they also face gender-based discriminations when it comes to power, position, when they also face gender-based discrimination when it comes to certain roles, within political roles or political positions. So we see that how Rajniti really problematizes this. Andhi, on the other hand, is a very important and a very interesting film. It talks about middle class, it talks about ambition, and it also talks about a very successful political career of a woman politician. And so we have to now go back from 2010 to 1975, and perhaps when we look at film and gender, or the treatment of gender, particularly women issues in films, we need to also perhaps understand that what was going on in India at that time in the 1970s and 1980s in terms of women movement, in terms of yeah, women organizations getting mobilized, unionized, and perhaps they were influencing films also, particularly Hindi films. We know films like Mirch Masala. Obviously, it's about the colonial times, but the treatment, and also we have to talk about these women actors, who were doing films at that time. So I. Because I look at performance histories, I do cultural studies, so I don't want to only look at these films from the film studies perspective, that is filmmaking, production, circulation, and other aspects, but I would also like to connect these films, or these periods or this time with the social, cultural, and political movements that were going on in India during that time. So I will not now, and obviously, as you know, that I have already only spoken about women as quote unquote gender and their treatment in the films, but I would like to restrict myself till here. When I talk about gender, I would like to talk about representation of women, not really men or any other gender identity as of now in this section. The next section that I have talked about, I will talk about, is the issue, representation of transgender, transgender figures or transgender themes, and as well as queer themes or LGBT themes. So the one, obviously, as we know that transgenders in Hindi cinema, they they have been portrayed as a comedy, in comic characters, as villains, as sex workers, prostitutions, as murderers, as lower class people. I and as but very interestingly, I don't find enough mention of caste or religion in the portrayal of transgender characters or figures in Hindi cinema. We definitely, when we talk about the representation, we know that there was a film called Kuara Bap, unmarried father, and there was the quote unquote the real hijras appeared during a song and dance sequence. So that was the first time when we see that Bombay Hindi cinema were getting real hijras to come and do a kind of a scene. And then we see that in Mani Ratnam's 1995 film Bombay, we see that a very sympathetic portrayal of the Hijra character of the community. And then we see obviously later in Deepa Mehta's Water also. And Deepa Mehta's Water is perhaps bringing the caste dimension a little bit, when Gulabi, the Hijra sex worker, or the mediator, so when she was trying to talk about, or when she was trying to bring the outcast widows of Varanasi into sex work. So we see a little bit of caste on class vis-a-vis gender and transgender characters in Deepa Mehta's Water. And another one is a very important film and a very important year is Tamanna. You all know about this film in 1997, and got released in 1997. And Tamanna talks about a Hijra person adopting a child and then helping the child in her search of her identity. And Tamanna obviously received appreciation, and Tamanna is an important film because not only it deals the transgender issue in a very sympathetic, in a very compassionate, and quite in a better way. But it is also important because 1997 is the year when Fire was released. And as you know that in queer activism, we call that was the Fire moment of Indian queer activism, because Fire was released, it ran for almost 3 weeks with no problems, but then suddenly the women organizations of right-wing outfits, they mobilized people and they started doing vandalized cinema theater halls where Fire was screened. They stopped the screening of Fire, and they said that it's against Indian culture. We can talk about that Fire as a problematic lesbian film, but Fire definitely mobilized the sporadic or the scattered queer communities or citizens of India and brought them together. And I call it a very important moment of queer struggles in India. And obviously, Fire as a film helped us to mobilize queer citizens during that time. And then we have fought along a battle, and there are fantastic queer people for whom now homosexuality is decriminalized in India. So we see all these things, but another very interesting film that I would like to talk about, because we generally don't talk about other aspects when we talk about queer issues or transgender issues. So one is definitely caste, second is religion, and third is disability. So Aligarh, which got released also recently, as you know, and it talks about it's based on a true incident, and it talks about university spaces, as spaces which are perhaps which makes which these university spaces are spaces where we also feel quite secured. Maybe if we are not accepted in our homes, as queer individuals, maybe university spaces, workspaces, or classrooms can offer us an alternative space where we feel secure. So Aligarh talks about this dystopia also, that sometimes it is not like this. And Aligarh also talks about the legal fight and the legal, winning of the case. And obviously, as you know, that Aligarh holds importance because it was the incident also took place after the Delhi High Court decriminalized homosexuality in 2009. But the treatment of the deviant other or the non-normative in Aligarh is something which we need to closely analyze. But another important film from recent time is Margarita with a Straw. And we see that it talks about disability, it talks about sexuality, it talks about gender, it talks about, queering and queerness. And it talks also about how queer love empowers one. And we generally don't see films like this, where disability and sexual passion or sexual desire can be clubbed together as an important theme, and then a film is made on that. So I would definitely want to hear from you guys that how you guys think of Lipstick Under My Burqa and Margarita with a Straw, particularly these two films, and how they treated gender and sexuality also. We can talk a little bit about, I have spoken a lot today in another in my class about gender, sexuality, and queer theories. We can also talk if you have any other questions to ask or to clarify anything. So I think I will stop now, and then yeah.
Yeah. Well, that has been a brilliant introduction, Gaurav, and I've tried to make note of all the movies that you have, shared with us. And I think I've watched some of them, and I did not watch some of them, and all our audience have got a great list to go on. So, if any of you in the audience have any questions or comments, you can unmute your microphone and directly ask Gaurav, or you can even post it in the chat box. Yeah. So meanwhile, Gaurav, yeah, I think my goodness, Lipstick Under My Burqa was one movie which surprised me, and I was really, really happy to see such a movie. Because I have not seen anything like it before, and especially the character of Buaji is something that I have thoroughly enjoyed because that movie has covered lots of layers and lots of complexities and packed everything together. And I don't think I've seen some people taking the movie in the right way, but not many could appreciate the movie, the point of it, because we are still not a society that has accepted the ideas of sexuality and age related to age. Even younger women masturbating is not something anybody would think, or any younger women, so older women falling in love, doing anything of that sort. It's actually questioning our conservatism or our thought process. So I think that is one brilliant movie. So, anybody in the audience would like to share their views or thoughts, not just on these movies, but anything that you have in your mind, or any questions?
Yeah, Gaurav, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, this is Abhishek, you know.
Hi, Abhishek. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a very illuminating and insightful presentation, and I was really looking forward to it ever since I came to know of you talking about these issues. The thing is that not that I have a problem, but I am a bit curious that you have in both your sections of gender and queerness in in Hindi cinema, you have chosen women characters. So you have sort of evaded talking about uh, you know male homosexual characters, or talking about men, men as general. So what I just want to know, that is it a conscious choice that you wanted to talk only about women, whether it was gender or queerness, because you spoke about fire and other films, but there a lot of films are about men, men characters which are homosexual or bisexual or such. So was it a conscious choice, or like maybe perhaps because of the paucity of time, or I'm just curious. Not It's not a question. It just take it as
Yeah.
a sort of a curiosity.
No, as I said, Abhishek, thank you for for your comment. But I thought that when I will speak for the first 15 or 20 minutes, I will only focus on women characters in films and transgender characters. That was my conscious choice. But as you said, because then I thought that once I discuss with the audience, and if audience don't bring it up, what I want to say is that also about two important films also, as you said, about bisexuality and also about representation of male or men, queer men. So one film that I want to talk about is My Brother Nikhil, because it's again a very important film, because it treats the issue of AIDS and HIV, and also sexuality, homosexuality. So how so India is still struggling to actually accept HIV positive people, or HIV or AIDS as just another disease which is not contagious. But My Brother Nikhil obviously talks about gay love, about a disease which was almost grappling the entire world it was a pandemic situation of 1980, late 80s and 90s. So yes, that was one film I definitely want to talk about. The another film which I think all of you have watched, and it's a short film of Faraz, called Sisak. It's also India's first silent LGBT love story, where Faraz is a very dear friend, and the film, it talks about two men liking each other, and perhaps want to come close to each other, and they meet each other on train. But the film is very beautifully shot, but then there are a lot of things, and Faraz obviously said it in many platforms, that because of lack of money he wanted to make a feature film, but he didn't get the budget, so obviously he made a short film. But one of the characters is married, and you see that he is playing with his wedding ring. So you see, obviously, so you assume that he is a married man. Perhaps he's a bisexual man. I'm not even going into the idea of marriage of convenience, and we see another man, another boy, young boy, who is perhaps gay. So we see these characters also in short films made in Hindi, or in silent films. So in Hindi cinema we see these main characters also, but these I definitely wanted to talk when I wanted to talk in the context of sexuality, men and sexuality in Hindi cinema. Consciously, I did not want to talk about representation of men in Hindi cinema, not in the context of queer films, but in general. That I did not want to say, talk about. But definitely, I wanted to talk about queer men in Hindi cinema. So, but I was keeping it for the discussion or for the later part. But yeah, I hope I have answered you, or I have also, you know.
Yeah, you have answered it beautifully. Also, I think, and it might be, you might take it as a suggestion that should be a series of lectures rather than just one presentation, because the subject matter that has to be encapsulated is so vast. And I know that I know you personally. We both are from JNU and from the same department. So I know that you are not a film theorist, but I know that you have a vast mine of information on, film studies or gender studies. So if this could be a series of lecture that perhaps we could all, gain from, rather than just one talk and, ending with that. So this is also something for the organizers that I am trying to propose, that. And of course I would, and please talk about, like, uh, queer men, because there is so much to talk about them. I mean, whether gay by choice, or bisexual, or MSMs, or, like, a whole range of men. So, and please, and who would be a better person than you talking about such categories, and binaries, non-binaries, both. So this if this could be a series of lecture rather than just one lecture, because I just think that there is a lot to be, putting, and enlightening the audience with your uh, you know yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Abhishek. I think, yeah, you're very right, because this is a vast topic which most of us are not really aware of. So only one or two aspects now that which have become popular is all we know, and not much. And certainly we'll try to have series of lectures on these, covering different aspects of the issues. So thank you for your suggestion. So anybody
Yeah,
else would like to?
because Abhishek is right. This is a vast topic, and Hindi cinema very interestingly brings homoeroticism in men. You know, in our Jai Viru scene, "Ye dosti hum nahi todenge," also in song sequences. Cross dressing. We know Vishwajit getting cross dressed, or Rishi Kapoor getting cross dressed, or we see, and these are sometimes very problematic. Cross dressing is something which is in our tradition, which we in our performance traditions, but cross dressing in Hindi cinema sometimes is in the form of caricature, and particularly men cross dressing is very, very problematic. But also in certain song sequence we see men dancing with each other, and men so freely or so passionately holding each other, is something which Abhishek has pointed out, is something we need to understand, that perhaps consciously or unconsciously the choreographer or the film directors, they are actually what they have observed in real life, perhaps they're also showing it. Particularly you see all those films with political scenes or violence, and like Ganga Jal and others, we see when there are certain dance choreographies in situated in UP or Bihar. Particularly we see how men, it's a all men situation, but the way they dance, perhaps we know about Londa Nach of Bihar, right? So when we know that such kind of a performance tradition is filmed in a film, we see that how men actors are also performing. So we cannot completely look at these depictions and the real life performances separately, because films do bring this kind of homoeroticism, homoromanticism, and kind of closeted homosexual feelings of Indian men through this kind of song sequences, or certain episodes, So this is one. Yeah.
So there's a question, Gaurav. Shivani Pete is asking, since you're discussing cross-dressing in cinema, just wanted to know your opinion about movies like Natrang.
Natrang is one of my favorite films also, and so again, Natrang is very much situated, very much part of the performance tradition of India, and this Indian performance tradition, we all know that before women coming on stage, men used to do cross dress, so there was this female impersonification, so this tradition of female impersonation was very much there. Impersonators were very much there, and they lost their job when women started coming to performance traditions, and particularly after partition, when women joined folk, urban, popular entertainment industries. So obviously, these female impersonators lost that position. So Natrang, in a way, very interesting, because it definitely showcases our this cross-dressing tradition, but also there are song sequences in Natrang. There are particular scenes where you see people are getting dressed, or it's a kind of a training process. So in that way, Natrang is also very interesting. But I won't call Natrang very problematic the way I would see men getting cross-dressed to find their lovers when they go to their lovers' houses, and problematic love affairs happen between the girl's father and the hero. These are very problematic. Whereas in the context of cross-dressing, Chachi 420 is another very interesting film, because it talks about a masculine father figure who cross dresses to gain the love and trust of the daughter, and as well as wife. And we see again the problems, but it also should make us realize that, our standard understanding of beauty or aesthetics perhaps is something which is popularized and questionable because of matrimonial ads and other nonsense advertisements, because we see Indian men of all ages falling in love with these cross-dressed men who are not very feminine, who are not having their perfect body, they're plumpy, they're perhaps having hair on their skin, or they're using loud makeup, or they are having not a very feminine voice. But we are seeing that Indian men are liking these cross-dressed men, thinking them as women. So when we talk about the standard of beauty or aesthetics of beauty, and perhaps what we think in the mainstream, we need to also understand and re-understand and revisit that perhaps advertisements and matrimonial ads and these heteropatriarchal and sexist society perhaps given a different definition to our understanding of aesthetics, but perhaps we are not like that. Indian men and women perhaps want, they have their different paradigms and parameters, different parameters of beauty, So this is one thing I think that we can think of. Yeah.
Any anybody else who has any questions or comments? So, but meanwhile, Gaurav, I have one question.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's take Saurabh's comment. Here's a comment. Ironically, we appreciate actors which portray transgender characters, but do not see transgender actors, or maybe do not want to see transgender actors performing these roles. So, which is a pleasant exception, is the character of Chini in web series Patal Lok. So, what do you have any comments on that?
Yeah. So, Saurabh, thank you for asking this question because it's a very important question, and it is sad, it is unfortunate that we do not give opportunity, space to transgender or queer actors to come out openly, to talk about their sexual identities, and also to take up acting or filmmaking as a profession. Because when we talk about empowering of queer men and women or queer individuals or transgender community, it also means dignified profession. It means a dignified profession through which you can earn money, because you need money for sustain, you know. So sex work or working as a part-timer, as a full-timer in fashion industry or beauty parlors, or as domestic help or in some other job is not always the dignified profession. We need to see queer communities also in mainstream profession and with a solid confidence of their queer identities. So the Hindi film industry, and particularly Bollywood, has not really opened up to transgender actors. And Faraz is and if you Google search on Faraz, he has been trying to make a feature film on a Parsi transgender character, and he has been actually looking for a transgender actor, not necessarily Parsi, though he has his own understanding and his own expectations of a Parsi representation in that figure. But then he wants basically a transgender actor. We don't find it. And I was recently talking to Faraz, and Faraz was saying that cisgender actors, when they will talk about transgender issues or when they will portray transgender characters or queer characters, it will be problematic. Or cisgender film directors, makers, when they will make films, and when they will not really think through the queer issues, it will be very problematic. So this is one. And but I would also like to tell you that Faraz has initiated with Keshav Suri Foundation something called Trans Action, and I was part of the first series where we trained transgender individuals and also queer individuals, in acting style. So like personally, I conducted a few sessions with them along with other colleagues, to train them, because it would be easy to tell that, oh, we don't have transgender actors because we don't see them coming to the profession. But you need to also make that space, and you need to invite transgender actors would like to take acting as a profession, and you need to train them. Because if you can train Nashiruddin Shah, in National School of Drama, then why can't you train a transgender person in National School of Drama? Why can't you have a special quota for a transgender person to get enrolled in National School of Drama, get that person trained in acting, get that person trained in theater and filmmaking, production, and then ask that person to join the industry? You have to initiate that. So thank you, Sora, for asking this question.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question and a wonderful response. Uh, so, anybody else would like to pitch in?
Yeah, can I ask another question?
Yes,
Yeah.
Abhishek. Please.
Yeah, Gaurav. So you spoke about fire, as, and it was really fire in the sense of the term, in both, in the context of heralding, a trend of showing queer characters, and also the vandalism and opposition that ensued, right? So it was fire in true sense of the term. Now, my question is that, correct me if I'm mistaken, but fire is about two women characters who circumstantially come together because they both have been neglected by their spouses. So the love between them, for me, it didn't feel that organic or natural, as opposed to films that are coming now on lesbian characters, who are truly in love and who are like, for example, this uh, film coming up, that has Swara and Divya Datta, Sisak,
Shir Kurma.
yeah,
Shir Kurma.
Sher Kurma, yeah. which shows a more intimate and passionate love story between two women who are not who have not circumstantially come together, because of certain boundaries or expulsions or certain kind of rejections. So that transition, how do you see Fire to Share Kurma as sort of a trajectory that has followed in showing, lesbian characters?
So, Abhishek, so Fire is definitely an important film we cannot ignore. But as I have mentioned while discussing Fire, that it is very problematic in its own treatment of lesbianism as such, But I I have I have a little bit of problem of what you are saying, because definitely it's two women coming for their sexual fulfillment. It's a circumstantial moment for them, but this is how it happens, you know this is what Judith Butler has also talked about, the need of sexual the need of lesbian desire, and the explicit ideas of lesbianism also, it's not only about circumstances. This is also about we don't want to talk about what radical lesbianism talks about, but it is also about women friendship, that not necessarily be sexual, that can be sexual. A lot of queer feminists think that women friendship should also look at the sexual aspect of it, but it can be also about a network of women. It can be about women supporting women, and it can be also about women who are confident and comfortable to open up to same sex experiment and relationship with other women also. So in Fire, both Nandita Das and Shabana Azmi, perhaps they were not queer as such, perhaps they were not quote unquote born queer, but through circumstances, they actually found love. And what is interesting about Fire is that they have stuck to their understanding of love and togetherness, because they are now for each other, so in that way Fire is also very interesting, because it happens that suppose if I, as a queer man, fall in love with a confused man who perhaps has queer sensibilities but not sure whether he's MSM, men having sex with men, or he's bisexual, or he's gay, or he's just a non-binary person, he doesn't know. But what happens is that if our moment, let's say quote unquote a moment, where we have this moment and we become sexually active or intimate, and that is like a moment of awakening or realization in him, about his own sexual identity, I think we need to also accept that, because this is also part of the reality. This is what we face. This is what I face in my everyday queer life, and also in my activism, that there are a lot of men who generally don't want to accept this side of them. Homophobia is not only about fear of homosexuals. Homophobia is also about your internal fear, that the fear to accept that there can be a homosexual inside you, so these moments, if they create this kind of queer solidarities and relationship, I think we need to also embrace and accept it, and we can obviously theorize it more in the lens of radical lesbianism, with the lesbian quantum, continuum that we talk about, so we can talk about all these things. Now, your another one is Shir Kurma, you mentioned, and I think we are all waiting for the film to get released, because we know that because of this ongoing pandemic, it is not getting released, and we all are requesting for us to release it. But obviously, the film got selected in many international film festivals, which are all postponed now. But Shir Kurma is very interesting in two ways, and I think that we all need to remember why it is going to be a very important film. Because one is that one of the characters, out of two so-called women, is non-binary. Divya Dutt mentions that she identifies themselves as they or they. Divya, that this character does not say that I am she. We see two women making out. We see two women in love, but one of them is saying that I am non-binary. You know, so we need to also understand that perhaps Shir Kurma will also open up the discussion about pronouns, that as queer individuals, as films dealing with queer issues, it is also important for us to use pronouns. Perhaps one queer character in a film will not want to be associated with him or she, will be only associated with their just name. you know the second one is religion, because both these characters are Muslim. How do we see queer and religion treated in Hindi cinema? Because it's about homecoming. It's a film which is talking about Eid, Eid time. It's festivity. It's a religious festival. It is all about acceptance. It's all about family. Then how do we see that Hindi cinema treating the idea of family, motherhood, and acceptance through queer themes or through queer characters? you know and that's why I have told, Ria can talk about it, because I have told my students that we need to have mainstream films also. We need to have kuch kuch hota hai, gay kuch hota hai. We need to have gay DDLG also, which can be completely problematic. But we need to have it also. Like for example, the recent film like Shubh Mangal Zyada Savdhan, right? It is quite problematic in many ways. But look at also Sonam Kapoor's film. I'm forgetting the name. What's the name of the film?
एक लड़की को देखा
एक लड़की को देखा तो ऐसा लगा. Yeah, it's a film about not about only lesbian love. It's a film about a lesbian character and her father. It's a film about father-daughter relationship. And also look at the last scene of Der Ishkia. It is red Maruti 800, in which we have seen hero and heroine running away from the world, in which we see them happily married and living, happily married. We are seeing that Nasiruddin Shah and they're telling Huma Qureshi and Madhuri Dixit that, go, the car is waiting. So we see that how all these things are also, this so-called mainstream stereotype, all these images or these particular ways of shooting or filming are also brought to, make queer love stories, in the mainstream, or normalize in the mainstream, quote unquote, normalize in the mainstream. Yes.
Yeah, that's been wonderful. I'm really, really enjoying this talk, Gaurav. But I think now we are running out of time. But we can still have one or two comments if anybody has. Otherwise, we can wrap up the session.
You wanted to ask something?
Yeah. So my question was that, so generally, my question is how the on-screen representation of queerness, especially, translates in shaping our perspectives off-screen, especially, most cinema, at least in the South Indian cinema, the Telugu cinema, the Tamil cinema that I have seen. So they often this queerness or, gay or I don't think I've seen any lesbian representation until now, but at least in the so there's this mockery. There's an aspect of in the comedy shows in the popular media. There are always mocking the homosexual characters. They're just showing them as comedians or men running away when another man approaches you. Building such characters, and they're everywhere. So what do you think should be done in that regard, or how do you take that, and how should the audience look at such things and try to be more sensitive? So, yeah.
The audience is the maibab of the film industry. So we have expectations from the audience, that audience will reject such kind of portrayal. But we have to also understand that Indian audience is very different. But we have not been able to really politicize and cultivate our own audience in a very politicized manner. And and we have also quite failed to cultivate our pockets of audience for this kind of films to get received and circulate and be successful. But the whole idea is that one, the cisgender or so-called heteropatriarchal queer filmmakers who actually portray gender, both men and women, in a very stereotyped way, they have to get out of that treatment. They have to portray gender. We know that Bollywood loves masala films. Okay, fine. Bring masala, objectify women body, objectify men body. I won't mind watching John Abraham naked or in a trunk, swim trunk, the way I would also like to watch perhaps Mallika Sherawat doing a very raunchy or very hot quote unquote dance sequence. So objectify, but then also keep it a balanced way, and at the same time there have to be some filmmakers or from audience also critiquing this objectifying of bodies also, but let us say that there has to be some kind of balance. But now we see obviously it's very much imbalanced because portrayal of gender and particularly women characters quite bizarre. It's like you cannot really sit through those films, one. Second is that we need to have more discussion within the film fraternity also. I don't know that if the film industry actually organize workshops or discussions, or there are filmmaker forums that I know, whether they actually take up these issues, because we know that a lot of queer feminist organizations or LGBT organizations train journalists, police, medical people how to treat or how to address or engage with queer individuals. I think these organizations need to also engage with film fraternity or film directors, makers, producers, that that you cannot really, there has to be continuous conversations or dialogues. One is that. Second is that, of course, we need more queer filmmakers. For us says that, that it's a privilege to make films. And if you are a queer filmmaker, use your sexual identity, use your politics of sexuality, use your sensibility of being a queer and then make films. Because the way he for us recognizes himself as a non-binary person, but then he brings his own understanding of queer self or queerness in his films. So we need filmmakers like that also, who can make such films. And obviously we need mainstream films. We also need another film like we need film like जब एक लड़की को जब एक लड़की को जब देखा so we need films like that, because films which you can actually sit with your parents and watch. We need to take steps slowly, and we need to normalize, quote unquote, normalize it. We need to make our parents, our grandmothers, grandparents think that, okay, this is very normal, and this is something which is part of our life. It is complete nonsense when people would say that, our parents don't understand queer politics. I refuse to understand. Our parents don't have the rhetoric. They are not introduced to queer theories, because I have talked in several forums that we have failed because our queer activism is very English language centric, urban centric. We need to talk about queerness in Indian languages, in all Indian languages. We need to develop our own terminologies. And our parents grow faster than us. You introduce them to this, you tell them that there is patriarchy, there is capitalism, there is sexist, there are binaries, and you need to address and you need to understand. Our parents will understand, our grandparents will understand, the society will change. But anyway, the question is that we need to have a complete, understanding and dialogues going on through several avenues, through several modes, and that can happen from the school level, college level, student unions, activist forums, filmmakers, everyone, they have to start talking about queerness, that this is not something which is abnormal, which is unnatural. And so stereotyping or making comedy or comic caricature out of them is something which is not accepted, and you cannot do that. Okay, like I might walk like this. That is Women also do it. You don't carry, you don't make fun of them. Then why do you make fun of a quote unquote a feminine gay man? Or we have to understand about hijra aesthetics. Hijra people want to dress up like that, and that is normal for them. Who are we to question that? So all these things we need to discuss, we need to bring in our discussions. I think then only we can bring significant changes. But I think that uh, Hindi cinema or Bollywood and regional films or documentary films are two different trajectories. Because regional filmmakers or documentary filmmakers, they come from a solid activist background mostly, most of the time. So their treatment of queer issues is very different. And they're quite want to politicize their audience. Whereas the mainstream film industry is still caught up with these masalas and binaries. But all these two distinct tributaries, they need to come together. They need to have a solid dialogue, and they need to take, learn from each other. And more we have mainstream films in Hindi cinema, in Bombay cinema, on queer issues, I think more we will accept it. And definitely, I would like to see caste, religion, and class. We cannot talk about queer themes, queer representations without talking about caste, class, and religion. And that's why Shir Kurma or film like Shuv Mangal, very important, because we see caste coming in also.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gaurav. I think it has been one fantastic talk, and I think now we've got a whole list of movies that will, keep us occupied for the coming few days. And so, yeah, I don't think we have any more questions. And really, really, thank you for giving your time. This was a talk that we have been planning for a long time, and for
Yes.
finally, it came, successfully. So thank you for joining us, Gaurav.
Thank you for calling me, Kranti, and more power to Radio Sofia team. As
Thank you.
Abhishek has already proposed, we should have more such talks, and maybe if your audience also wants, then maybe we can organize something more.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure, sure. Thank you. And all of you can visit the Radio Sophia YouTube channel. We have the previous talks on a lot of topics, and it's been 5 months, and we're running successfully. And I'm very much looking forward this for this venture to go on, covering much more things. So thank you very much.